Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome, and we're going to get started. But again, thanks for being here. My name is Erica Morin, and I am the Manager of Training and Member Services at MSIC. Our webinar today will discuss how diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, creates value for credit union employees, members, and organizations. I'm delighted to introduce to you today Ronaldo Hardy of CU Strategic Planning. He is a highly sought after speaker on raising awareness of and knowledge about diversity, equity, and inclusion. He has published in the Credit Union Journal, the Credit Union Times, Credit Union Insight, Credit Union Magazine, and Credit Union Today. He has also been the keynote speaker at CUNA Management School, the Cornerstone Credit Union League, Western CUNA Management Alumni Association, and the Credit Union Leadership Convention, just to name a few. Today, we are honored to have him here with us to share his counsel and insights regarding DEI and the opportunities for credit unions to change their communities while also being profitable. At the conclusion of today's presentation, we will have time for questions and answers, so feel free to send your questions via the Q&A or the chat box at any time during Ronaldo's presentation, and we will get to those questions at the conclusion of his session. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ronaldo. Thank you.
You can understand how DEI can impact the bottom line of your organization. I'm going to talk about 7 ways highly profitable credit unions measure the ROI of DEI. And you will be surprised that the level of impact that DEI can have on your bottom line. I'm speaking from experience, having led 2 credit unions myself prior to being a full-time consultant, and also not only just leading them, but leading them with DEI at the forefront of our decision-making and our strategy. And I was able to see a very good growth in both organizations. By the time I left the last credit union that I was leading, our ROA was 128 basis points. So if you can only imagine having an ROA that high and what that meant for our organization, we were able to do a lot of great things because we understood the impact of DEI and how to lead it properly. Now, I know you're probably here for 3 different reasons, and it may be more, but some that stand out to me. You want to make a bigger impact in your community. Many of us, because we are here to do good, to make impact, to see change happen, we want to make those big impacts in our community. It's a part of the fabric of who we are as credit unions. And so you're here for that reason. Many of you are here because you know diversity, equity, and inclusion are right and necessary, but you don't necessarily know what to do. So, it's like I keep hearing everybody talk about DEI. I know it's something that I should be focused on, but I really don't know how to get started, what specifically I should be navigating, and how I should be taking the steps that I need to take, right? Or maybe you want to be responsible in your business practices as you implement this. So you think to yourself, I want to do DEI, I want to do it the right way, but I want to be responsible. I want to know that it can have some level of bottom line impact, especially those of you who you're dealing with your boards and you want them to have a better understanding about why you have made this a key strategy for your organization. I totally understand why it is important for you to be able to go back and communicate the impact that this could have on your bottom line, right? And I want to also challenge you to open your mind today. What I find is, especially a lot in our industry, we're very programmed to only look for, I don't want to say only, but the majority of time, we look for growth in the area, well, 3 key areas. We're looking for growth in loans, because we want our bottom line to be performing well. That loan to share ratio needs to be good. We look for growth in shares when we need it, and we're looking for growth in assets. And many times, because we are looking for all of these growth in these specific areas, we'll look at DEI and we won't necessarily understand the impact that it could have. I've watched organizations skip over the focus on DEI or not know how to even invest the right amount of money in their budget to make sure they're bolstering up their DEI efforts, because sometimes they don't see the immediate tangible impact. But all types of research that I'm going to show you in a moment shows that the organization will perform better financially when DEI is a centerpiece of focus. Two common mistakes that I see organizations making concerning DEI include a lack of understanding. So I have a lot of organizations that it's like, I'm hearing all of the buzzwords around DEI, but I really don't get it. I don't fully understand it. And then there's also those who understand it per se, but have no measurements in place. Don't know how to necessarily measure it, cannot really indicate how successful they are, what's making them successful, and where is that success showing up. So having the understanding is important, but knowing how to measure your impacts, very, very, very important for your organization as well. Now, I'm a Louisiana guy. So I am from Louisiana, live in Louisiana, born and raised, always been in Louisiana. And I will tell you, we are at the bottom of many lists. We're at the bottom of many lists. But one list that we'll never be at the bottom of is food. We know how to cook the best food that you will ever taste in your life. It's the one thing that, you know, in spite of a lack of a plethora of different things in Louisiana, that food, it is enough to keep me around because it is excellent. And one of our dishes of specialty that you may have heard of before is gumbo. We do gumbo, and I like to say this all the time. We would appreciate it if we get to keep doing our gumbo with no one else trying to replicate or imitate our gumbo. I was sharing this one time. Disney shared a recipe of gumbo. This had to be about 5 years ago, and it had kale in it, and they shared the recipe as Louisiana gumbo. With kale in it. We would never put kale in our gumbo. So, but if we think about gumbo, and I may be making you hungry because it's in the morning time, but if we think about gumbo, we could consider DEI through that lens. And I want you to understand that diversity, inclusion, and equity, and that's the true stair-step approach. They are three separate things that work in concert with one another. So they are separate in nature. They do different things, but they actually work together. And what you'll find is I've seen a lot of organizations who'll say, we're doing really good with DEI. And what they're really wanting to say is, we have done very well with diversity, because most organizations are not afraid of diversity at this point. Many of us have accepted that that is an expectation. It's the inclusion and the equity where there's tons of work to do. So let's explain diversity, equity, and inclusion by comparing it to gumbo. When I think about diversity, diversity is literally simply the representation of difference. That's all it is. It's the representation of difference. And so if we compare that back to gumbo, then diversity would simply mean that I have the ingredients that I need to make the gumbo, but they're sitting on the counter. So I have everything I need. I have my ingredients. You know, I got all my stuff to make my roux. I have my seasonings. I have my sausage and my chicken and crabs and all the things you put in there. I have everything I need. All of my ingredients, though, are on the counter. So diversity means that you have the difference represented. And because diversity is simply the representation of difference, then you can have a group of people that may not be diverse in one category, but they can still be diverse. So for example, I could walk into a room of 5 other African American men, and while we may all be African American, we may all be male, we still could be diverse. We could be diverse in our sexual orientation, political preference, gender identity, all different types of things can make us still generationally, right? We could still be diverse because diversity is just a representation of difference, right? The diversity that we look for a lot is gender diversity and racial diversity when we look within our, and generational as well, when we look within our organizations. But the reality is that's all diversity is. It's the representation of difference. Inclusion, and we say diversity, equity, and inclusion because you said diversity, inclusion, and equity, and you did an acronym, it was spelled DIE, and that just is not what we want to spell. But the truth of the matter is inclusion is the second step in the process. It's not only the second step, it's the most important step in the process. The inclusion is literally the intentional engagement of diversity or the intentional engagement of the difference. So inclusion says, I don't just have diversity present, but I'm going to do something with it, right? I'm going to do something with the diversity that I have represented. Inclusion in the context of gumbo would literally be the exact same thing as getting those ingredients for that gumbo off the countertop and putting them in the pot. So if you're thinking inclusion, now you're thinking diversity is I have the ingredients that I need. Inclusion says I'm not going to just leave them on the countertop. I'm going to do something with them. I'm going to make sure they make it into the pot. And if you're going to have the flavor that you are seeking, then you're going to have to make sure that you include all of those ingredients. Include them. Root word of inclusion is include. So if you think about what we're doing, then we're finding a way to include other people, include difference, right? This is important. This is why you're seeing more and more organizations finding out what matters to different demographics of people. I've seen people add Juneteenth as a holiday and are finding different people now are not just calling Columbus Day, but they're calling it Indigenous People Day, finding ways to include other groups of people. And I even think, and I've said this a lot, I believe that because of the evolutions that we're seeing, we're going to see movement even in what is considered both professional and unprofessional, because there are many things that we consider unprofessional that are simply cultural norms that might be different from ours, right? Equity is the last step in this process. And equity literally is the creation of opportunities for underrepresented populations. And to break that down is literally a seat at the table. Equity is the end goal. But I will say the reason why inclusion is still more important, because we've all been in a situation where we've probably seen forced equity, right? It was a particular group was not represented at a certain level, maybe the executive management level. So it was, we're going to create a pathway for someone from that demographic to be a part of the executive management team, but you bring them to the team without giving them a true voice, right? So even if inclusion is not present, forced equity won't do anything for you. You must have the inclusion piece. Equity in the context of gumbo would be like making chicken and sausage gumbo. When we say we're gonna make chicken and sausage gumbo, it would mean that we are concentrating on making sure that both chicken and sausage are represented within the gumbo. So remember, diversity is the representation of difference. In the context of gumbo, it's the ingredients on the counter. Inclusion is the intentional engagement of that difference. In the context of gumbo, it's the ingredients making it into the pot. Equity is the creation of opportunities for underrepresented populations. And in the context of gumbo, it is making sure that you have the proper distribution. In this case, chicken and sausage in the chicken and sausage gumbo. So now let's talk about impact and measurements. I want to help you over the next few minutes, and I'll give you some opportunity for some questions at the end. I'll leave about 15 to 20 minutes open just in case we have questions so we can dialogue a little bit. But I want to talk to you about impact and measurements so that you understand how this does impact your bottom line, right? And there are multiple things that you can be looking at to measure, and we'll talk a little bit even more on some things I haven't listed here, but I want to show you some 7 ways credit unions are determining their impact or the impact of DEI on their ROI. Number 1, DEI is proven to propel profits. It's proven to propel profits. I'm going to say it again. It's proven to propel profits. So when you're looking on whether or not you should be investing in this one, if you're looking at whether or not this should be a high level strategy or strategic direction and item for your organization, here's why. It literally is proven to propel your profits. And if you think about it, it makes sense. When you consider the people that we're serving by way of membership, when you're considering our broader communities, when you're considering our workforce, right? An organization that's concentrating on DEI, are you going to get the best participation out of everyone involved? So employees are going to produce more. You can look at your productivity going up. Employees are going to be more efficient. You'll look at higher levels of efficiency. You're going to have better talent, right, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you will have a more engaged membership. Plus, when you're making decisions for the membership or for your broader community, it's important to have representation at the table, right? If you decide, I want to make decisions that would appeal to a 37-year-old Black man like me, right? But you don't have any African-American representation at your table, then anything that you're trying to do to reach me will be more or less assumption and without guidance from someone who may closely identify with the community. So by having that representation, it helps your strategies to be stronger. The most diverse companies, the research from McKinsey and Company found that the most diverse companies were 35% more likely to have above average earnings in their industry. 35%, that's a big gap. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams were 21% more likely to outperform on, listen to this, profitability, and 27% more likely to have superior value creation. So this was just by creating gender diversity, by making sure you have both men and women on the executive team. Look at the performance growth. Companies in the top quartile for ethnic or cultural diversity, meaning we have multiple ethnicities or races represented on executive teams, look at the jump, were 33% more likely to have industry-leading profitability. Again, I've explained to you why some of this is so, because by having representation, you have increased perspective, better perspective generally about the diverse audience of people you're trying to reach, which helps to drive better impact, better results. The second thing, DEI facilitates employee recruitment and retention. So it not only is DEI going to help you to recruit better, it's going to help you to retain the people who you have recruited. And this is important, as we all know that, you know, retention is vital. It is vital to us. Having the best people working for us is vital to our success. And so this is important for you in your organization. A Glassdoor survey found that 67%, so now we're talking 2/3 of people that are looking for a job, evaluate a company's diversity practices before accepting a job offer. So 2/3 of people are saying, before I even come and work for you, I want to be able to determine what's your organization's focus on DEI. You know, and people are looking for information in a variety of places. They're looking at what's your board composition. You know, they're looking at what's your executive management team comprised of. All of this matters. People want to see themselves represented in order to feel comfortable coming. So this will impact your recruiting. Employees with the highest level of engagement perform 20% better and are 87% less likely to leave the organization, according to a survey by Towers Perrin. And I'm going to say that again. Employees with the highest level of engagement perform 20% better, and they're 87% less likely to leave the organization, right? So this is going to help you. It increases your engagement. When we think about engagement, engagement is driven by inclusion. The more your organization focuses on inclusion, the higher the engagement will be. And the more engagement they have, the better your employees are going to perform, but also the more likely they are to stick with your organization. And so that's important. Also, on average, losing an entry-level employee costs employers 50% of that employee's annual salary. That's high. And losing a technical or senior level employee costs employers 50 to 250% of their annual salary. So if you consider the amount of money that's being lost as a result of the rotating, the open door that's always, you have people going out of your back door all the time, your attrition rate being high, you're having trouble with retention, turnover is high. It's costing you money, and it could be costing you a lot of money, right? So if you look at this example of this shows SHRM is saying that it's going to take you at least 50% of your employee's salary. All right. So if you're looking at an employee earning $60,000 just to replace that employee, it's going to cost you $30,000. Now, if that is a technical leader level employee, it's going to be much more. Right, so they are saying it will cost about 250% of that employee's salary. So someone in this example salaried at $125,000, it's going to cost $312,500 just to replace them. So the retention piece is important. I was dealing with an organization recently and trying to get them to understand this concept so that they would not accept a turnover rate that was higher than what they really needed to, based upon what their organization could really handle, right? These are important. These things are important because it could be impacting your bottom line. Here's the third thing. DEI improves employee performance. So it's going to improve employee performance. I'll stop and tell a story here, and I'll get back into this. So when I was working for the most recent credit union I led, we did a few things that were very, very transformational for us. When I first went in, the organization had a declining ROA, declining loan to share ratio, loans were declining, delinquencies were up, just all kinds of crazy things. And I remember telling the board in my first board meeting that our first focus as an organization was going to be the culture. And of course, I'm sure everybody's looking at me like, you don't want to focus on loan growth, or you want to focus? No, we're going to focus on culture first, because I believe the culture of the organization is what's going to cause everything to build properly. And so we also, in redefining the culture of our credit union, we retooled our vision and mission. I remember day one of going into strategic planning with our staff. And I told them on day one, I said, on today, we're not going to talk about any quantifiable goals, which was the temptation in a credit union strategic planning session to immediately jump to how are we going to grow loans, how are we going to increase shares, how are we going to grow assets, but we decided we were not going to do that at all. We were going to discuss one thing, and that was if we were suddenly no longer in this community, why would it miss us? And so we landed in two areas. We changed our vision to eliminate poverty in our community, and our mission became financial empowerment for all, and DEI became a key pillar in everything we did. We also moved to a productivity-driven model, so we made productivity our primary focus, so much so, and this was different, we decided if we had an employee that got done in 1 hour, in terms of what we were expecting in productivity, they got it done in 1 hour. What it took someone else 8 hours to do, we let them know we don't care about those other 7. If you want to be on Facebook, Amazon, it didn't bother us. because productivity was the driver. So with DEI, with a retool vision, with a productivity-driven model, it's why we start seeing all of our numbers move up, and they moved up rapidly and drastically. So I know for a fact that this improved employee performance is not only a reality, but it will actually then contribute back to number one, which is DEI propelling profits. According to USA Today, the average American worker is engaged at a 50% level. So can you imagine that your staff right now is giving you about 50% of what they could do? Most high-performing companies strive for at least 80%, right? And 78% of business leaders rate retention and engagement as engagement as urgent or important, according to a recent Deloitte study. But only 15% believe they are ready to address it, right? So this is important for you to know that when there is higher engagement, when there is higher performance, there will be greater profits on your bottom line, but also you're going to continue retaining those employees, so you're going to stop bleeding out unnecessary expense, right? All of this begins to tie together. So our profits are going to go up. Part of profits going up will be that we're recruiting better people as a result of this. Not only are we recruiting better people, we're retaining our people, and they are performing better for us as a result of this, right? Here's the next thing. DEI increases innovation and creativity. Now, I know a lot of this is still leaning back to how it drives our employees upward, but the employees are contributing and getting the results that we need organizationally. So it increases innovation and creativity. This is to be expected, because when you introduce difference into any room, you create opportunity, right, for different outcomes, right? Just by having women in a room that may have all men, now we're going to be able to see things from a perspective that maybe we didn't see it from before, right? Whether it's generational diversity, whether it's ethnic diversity, whatever the case may be, by adding whether it's sexual orientation, by adding those different perspectives, it creates a pathway for more creativity, which drives innovation upwards, which ultimately makes the organization more progressive and helps it to perform better. A Forbes survey reveals that 56% of international business leaders strongly agreed that diversity improved innovation in their companies. Strongly agreed. So more than half of international business leaders strongly agreed on this. And then according to a Boston Consulting Group study, companies that reported above average diversity on their management teams also reported innovation revenue that was 19 percentage points higher than that of companies with below average leadership diversity. 45% of total revenue versus just 26. I'm gonna read that again because this is big. According to a Boston Consulting Group study, companies that reported above average diversity on their management teams also reported innovation revenue that was 19 percentage points higher than that of companies with below average leadership diversity. 45% of total revenue versus just 26%. So greater revenue around innovation as a result of diverse representation. DEI increases innovation and creativity within the organization. This can help you drive new products. This can help you to develop better strategies to reach more or new market segments within your local communities. This is important. The next thing is DEI promotes member satisfaction. So when you are focusing on DEI, it increases member satisfaction. It creates the pathway for your members to feel better cared for and represented. There are studies that show that that part of the member satisfaction going up is that member feeling better by having that interaction with someone who looks or feels like them. Not that that has to happen all the time. It just creates a stronger comfort level. Not only does it create stronger comfort level in that member service experience, but also by way of the product and service offerings, the things that you're able to offer. As a result of this, it increases the satisfaction of the member. The value measurement is most often quantified by the Net Promoter Score. So I know many of you are probably familiar with Net Promoter Score. You're utilizing it, or you might be using CUNA's Member Customer Experience Survey as well. There are many tools that you can use, but member satisfaction is something that all of us should be concerned with. And not only is it something that we should all be concerned with, we should definitely know and recognize that we have a great opportunity to drastically improve that member satisfaction just by making DEI a focus. And not just by making it a focus, but doing it the right way. Doing it the right way. Number 6, DEI opens new opportunities. It opens new opportunities. So I'll give you an example. When we were leading our credit union, the credit union that I most recently left, and we had changed, we changed a few things. We changed our vision to eliminate poverty in the community. We changed our mission to financial empowerment for all. We made DEI the centerpiece of our focus. We changed our community partnerships and alignments to only be in step with what we were trying to do strategically. We changed our sponsorship strategy to where we were only sponsoring things that also align with our overall organizational focus and goal. One of the things that happened as a result of that, as we leaned into the partnerships that we needed that align with our strategy, one of the local health clinics actually ended up donating to us space in their facility to have a branch for free. So we didn't have to pay for the space. All we had to do was outfit it, and we were able to expand our footprint into an area of the city that we wanted to be in, with little to no overhead on our side to do it, as a result of this being a focus of ours, right? So it can open new opportunities for you. Measuring profitability from innovation is an excellent measure of the ROI from DEI, so what we just talked about. But also, according to BCG, companies with above average scores, diversity scores, experienced a 45% average innovation revenue in 2017, compared to only 26% experienced by below average diversity scores. So new opportunities are available for you as a result of it. And here's the 7th and final one. In just a moment, we'll start having some dialogue. But DEI boosts brand reputation. It boosts your brand reputation. I know I keep speaking about my last credit union, but when I got there, this was also one of the things that we were adversely impacted by. The brand reputation had been impacted by some poor practices in lending and collections primarily. And also there were some challenges that people had felt, both by staff and the community, about some particular groups being excluded, particular groups being overlooked, particular groups not being offered opportunity or fair treatment. And so this was something that we had to work on. I could tell you that we boosted brand reputation so much that even after I left, and when the organization went through 3 crises in that local community within 1 year, like 2 hurricanes and the pandemic, they were still able to grow by 60% through that time period because of the things we had done with brand reputation, when other organizations did experience some growth in their community, but it was only between 10 and 15%, but that credit union grew by 60%. And it was largely because I talked to the CEO, who was previously my COO, and he said it was largely because of what we had done by way of brand reputation. Many people started turning, new people started coming to the credit union. Everyone trusted the credit union a lot more because of the work that we had done to establish that. So this is something for you to know. A 2019 Elderman Trust Barometer found that 64% of consumers are now belief-driven buyers, who want brands to deliver on societal issues as well as products. This is up by 13 points since 2017. I like to say this a lot, that we're living in a modern day civil rights era. I believe that when it is documented, it will be documented as such. History is always given a name in the future. And it's going to be documented as such. And one of the greatest ways to see this is that consumers are understanding the power of a dollar and economic impact. And so one of the biggest characteristics of the previous civil rights era was boycotting and the impact that it had on organizations and ultimately decision making. And consumers are back in that mindset. Consumers are back in the mindset of, if I don't see myself represented, I'm not going to support this establishment. And so it has put additional pressure on us as credit unions to make sure we understand how we have to be present in things that matter to our membership, but not even only that, but also making sure that we have the right representation as well, so that our membership sees themselves represented. 81% say that their ability to trust the brand to do what is right can be a deciding factor or deal breaker. However, only 1 in 3 people can trust most of the brands they buy. It's a question for yourself. Is my brand trustworthy? Are we trusted, right? And 47% of people who buy first and stay loyal make the progression to advocate and defend the brand based on trust in the product alone. The willingness to stay loyal, though, advocate for the brand and defend increased to 68%, so by additional 21%, when including social responsibility. So consumers more than ever before, and this is not going to go away. It's actually going to ramp up. The younger and younger the generations are getting, the higher and higher their expectation around social responsibility is growing. So this will not go away. You need to be figuring out as an organization how to best integrate social responsibility into your business model in a way that makes you comfortable, but also adequately addresses the needs of your employees and membership alike. And with that said, I do thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I hope that this presentation was insightful. I know some of you have many questions also about the first steps that you should be taking in DEI, which is why I've also included my email so you can get in touch with me and we can get to work if that is what you like to do. And with that said, I'll turn it over to you to bring us through Q&A.
Yeah, we do. We do have several questions that came in during your presentation. But yeah, the statistics you shared are really kind of stunning. The 81%, that want to trust the brand that they're investing in. I mean, I think there's such an opportunity there for credit unions, based on what we value and what our motto is. So I mean, there's such an opportunity there. But I mean, even the 1 in 3, I mean, that's unbelievable.
It is.
But let me swing over to some of the questions that have come in. So I agree with this person who said, using the actually, no, I'll take this one that came in because there were two gumbo related questions, which I thought was such a great metaphor. So using the gumbo metaphor, wouldn't adding kale to the gumbo improve the DEI profile of the gumbo? And if so, why should kale not be included?
Well, kale just does not taste good in gumbo, right? So we talk about it from an inclusion piece. Yes, it's good to give kale an opportunity to be a part of the gumbo. It just doesn't taste good in the gumbo. It's not. So as a resident Louisiana guy, it's not true gumbo. Most of the stuff that we see on social media, whether it's gumbo or jambalaya or any other thing that we do, it's normally not right. So that's why. But you would be right in the context that including it would be good for inclusion.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next gumbo related question. Your gumbo breakdown with DEI was awesome. Should there be emphasis on one more than the other, or a certain order these should be addressed within organizations? Can you have one or two without the other, or is this a necessary set?
So you definitely, if you're going to do it right, you need all three. There's no way to do it right without all three. Okay. Um, you have to focus on diversity first because you can't get to inclusion and equity without it. So if you don't have, what I have found is most credit unions have diversity at this point. Most credit unions are going to have diverse representation. But the next step is the inclusion piece. What's happening in your culture, and is it truly inclusive? And then you do need to land at equity because none of the work matters to anybody unless equity is a part of it. So if I give you an example, if you have women working in your organization and you're saying we care about everybody, but those women have to keep looking at an executive team that doesn't have one woman on it, it's, same thing if you have African Americans, you have different, and what we have to grow out of is, I find a lot of people, and it's an excuse. It's not that it's not a truth, but it becomes an excuse when we say, I just hired the best person for the job. Well, then the question is, where did you source them? Did you source your candidates in a way that you allowed for a diverse representation to be present? And then also sometimes within the company's culture, if you are a credit union that hires primarily from within, what have you done within the culture that makes people feel like they won't even have an opportunity? So I'll give you an example. Have you ever done CUNA management school with me? And if you do it in the future, you'll know about this. But I do an entry exercise to open it up, right? And we divide the group into two groups. And so in one group, we'll have primarily white male and some white females. And this kind of represents the CEO or leadership structure of the industry at a specific asset size. And then we have minorities and women in another group, and we divide them up. And I'll bring one group in and I'll tell them, hey, this is about to get kind of weird. I'm going to bring this other group in. I'm going to be mean, belligerent, things that are not normal to me, but we're going through an exercise. And then we bring the other group in, and I'm all those things. And it's very interesting to watch the reactions, what happens. I bring them in, I have them to stand on the walls, and I'll tell them they can't sit down, they can't speak, they don't even get to raise their hand to ask a question. If I want to hear from them, I'm being like completely obnoxious. You can only imagine the level of discomfort that's going on here. And so after a certain point of me taking them through this whole period, I will open up the opportunity for them, the people on the wall, to compete for 2 seats at a table up front. And when I open that opportunity, without fail, only about 10% of people move to start going towards the seats. The other 90% decide up front, there's no way I'm even going to be able to get that opportunity, so I won't even try. And when we have discussion around it, they talk about it, the culture that was set, the things so it does something to them. So when we say even things like, I just hired the best person for the job, then we have to say, well, did we source properly? Did we give the right people opportunity by sourcing? And then if it's internal, then do we have problems within our culture that don't create the culture that makes people feel like they have that opportunity?
So this question kind of ties into what you were just speaking about with Ronaldo. The question is, do you think there is a bigger issue with lack of diversity in organizations as a whole, or a lack of diversity in leadership?
Primarily leadership. What I have found is most people, even if they don't like it, even if they have underlying bias or issues, people have adapted to and accepted that we are supposed to have diverse people in our organization. What I have found is it stops, and as that leadership ramps up, it gets lower and lower and lower and lower. And that's where the work is. And so what people start hearing is, oh, I gotta push people out. And no, you don't have to push anyone out, but through attrition and redesigning how you create your pipeline, You create those opportunities for those seats in that way. And then also sometimes there's an expansion of a team in order to create that opportunity as well. So you can grow a team to create that diverse representation as well. But yeah, the problems are more in leadership.
Leadership. Okay. Is there a line that should be drawn somewhere on the inclusion side? For example, how would you address including ideologies into the culture that may not mesh with basic gender or gender identity rights? For example, individuals who belong to fundamentalist religious groups, for example.
So I wouldn't overstep their religious belief, but I would help them to understand too that because we are an inclusive organization, that we will be creating a place where people who may have lifestyles different in their belief system will not only be accepted here, but appreciated. And that we do appreciate your different thought process. Like you can appreciate their different thought process while also having to understand that based upon what you're building, you're not going to leave anyone out. What you're not doing is you're not forcing onto them. You're not telling them you must believe in this way or you must do these things. You know, if you're telling somebody who has a belief system that doesn't align with LGBTQ plus, right? You saying, well, you got to go and serve at this event that is a pride event. I'm just using that as an example. Now you could be overstepping a person's individual right, but as an organization, you could still support people who are also in that grouping. You know, so I hope that makes sense. The inclusion piece is how do I do both and not either or.
Got it. What are, let me see, hang on. Let me see what are some creative ways to proactively source candidates from underrepresented communities? Do you have any insight on that?
It's about where you place the ads, right? So it's about how you write the ads. I would probably have to consult you deeper to get the results you want, the success you want. But it's about so many things. Like I'll give this example. We were looking, the first credit union I was CEO of, we were looking for a chief lending officer at the same time that the credit union down the street from us was looking for a chief lending officer. They were 3 times our size. They had a bigger budget for the person, everything. They had been recruiting for that role for 3 months and had only gotten 6 resumes before we started recruiting for the role. We recruited for that role and we wrote it different. So our actual ad was written to be attractive, to respond to our culture, but also to source the type of people we wanted. We placed it in different places. Like, for example, if you know that you want more African Americans present, then find your local HBCU. If you have one, if you don't have one, find out the statistics of your area. Where are they going to school, right? Where are you recruiting? Where does the ad need to be placed? We placed this ad 3 months after the same position against the credit union that was 3 times our size, and in 1 week we had 32 resumes. They got 6 in 3 months. So I literally just the other day posted a teaser on my LinkedIn to say, I'm gonna have a position opening as a director of DEI working with me in the firm. I didn't actually post the ad. I just posted the position, and based upon how I have been placed in the industry and things I've done, I literally have 6 conversations set up already with people who want to come and work in that role, and I have yet to post the job.
That's interesting. For recruitment practices, I think people just go to draw from the same well.
Yep.
And you're right. How can you expand, your organization if you're just going back to the same, three places or the same headhunter or whatever. So that's
Exactly.
really interesting. So I have a question here that said, recent reading I've done has included a new concept. It is belonging. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which
Yep.
outstrips the concept of inclusion, which may not go far enough. Curious what Ronaldo thinks about it.
Love it. So yeah, you heard me say the word because I've been studying it. The belonging piece is a step further because some organizations get into inclusion, but it's still performative, right? So it's like, well, look at us, we're being inclusive. The belonging is a little stronger because it does suggest that you truly belong here. It moves it a step further away from tolerating, because sometimes in the context of trying to do inclusion, people get to a place of just tolerating, where belonging moves it a step further. Yes.
What, let me see. What are some of the most effective DEI initiatives you've seen at a credit union? And are there any horror stories we can learn from?
Yeah, so there's several horror stories out there. You can find a few different moments that went viral in our industry. There was one where a group of people dressed up on Halloween at a credit union and they wore blackface. They were being the Jamaican bobsled team from Cool Runnings. There was one where someone had a Walking Dead figurine on their desk, but this particular figurine was black with a chain wrapped around their neck, almost like a noose. And even though it was a character, it just sent the wrong message. So there are a few different things like that that have gone wrong. Things that I've seen go well. A lot of people are doing employee resource groups. The ones that are doing it the best that I've gotten a chance to work with are the ones that understand that they need to assess themselves first. So if your thought process is we just need to do training, no, you training will definitely be a part of it, but there's no culture shift on training alone. As a matter of fact, one of the books that I would recommend that you read is The Practice of Adaptive Leadership. It's a Harvard Business Review book. It explains this better. When I say this, it explains adaptive change, which is what this is. This isn't a transactional change, it's adaptive in nature. And adaptive change takes specific strategies to be successful. So an organization that wants to do DEI well should be anticipating at least a 3-year journey to get there. And what I find we the most successful is something that we actually do is we do what I consider an unconscious bias assessment on the organization to help to determine what are the areas of vulnerability and to then build out the strategies from that. Because it's not truly a one size fits all, because your organization could be challenged in DEI in completely different areas than another one. So we need to find out what your individual credit union, where it is, really set that benchmark and then build a strategy out from there.
So just another, I knew this was going to be a lively session, Ronaldo, and I knew you were going to have a lot of questions. During the hiring process, how should DEI and merit be prioritized?
Well, a couple of different things. One of the things that I would recommend is, let's just say resumes come to HR and then are sent out to hiring managers. Take the names off, right? Let people look at resumes for their actual skill sets versus what their name is. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to a place and just because people saw Ronaldo, they thought that I was going to be Hispanic, or whatever. So these determinations can be made just by name. So that's one of the things. I encourage panel interviews more than singular, because when it's one-on-one, then bias could definitely get in the way. And you have an individual making decisions repeatedly based upon their own preference. So I encourage panel interviews as a part of the process as well. I also encourage evaluating the organization and departments in particular to determine where are you deficient, because sometimes you do need to go into a hiring process knowing that you need to hire for diversity, right? So you need to assess what's going on at the time. And then it's important to, in terms of communicating it, you'll be able to communicate it more to the potential candidates when you really have it as a part of your cultural norm and values. It's hard to communicate something that you're just kind of doing to follow. I try to tell people, don't follow DEI as a fad. It shouldn't be a fad. It should be something that we're committed to, because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, and it looks like there's one last question. And if anyone else has any questions, this would be the time to send it over. How much time, and this goes back to, you were just discussing this, how much time do you spend with a credit union to help them improve their DEI practices? How do you find credit union organizations respond to DEI changes? Is there ever resistance?
Yes, so there is, when I have seen resistance, resistance has primarily come because either one, the CEO or the board wasn't fully on board. And so that's when I see resistance happen. Um, to do it well, like I said, I believe DEI, the implementation of it, is about a 3-year journey. Um, there are different levels of engagement. So when an organization engages me at the basic level, if we're doing an assessment, we're looking at a 90 to 120 day process, so 3 to 4 months to assess. Um, and then if it's, hey, let's build a strategic and tactical plan around DEI, then we can allocate another 2 months to that, right? And then we start working through that. We also just recently implemented certification where we certify the credit union as a certified credit union, DEI credit union. And that's a 12-month process, of which we do 6 months of instruction. And then we do 6 months of project design, development, and deployment. So there are multiple ways, but for me, I believe it's at least a 3-year journey to do it well.
One more, and tying into what you're talking about, does the size of the credit union matter in terms of length of time? Do you find there's any difference in the size of the credit union? That's how I'm reading the question.
Not as much, not as much. I find that the timeline still is about the same.
Okay, all right. Well, that looks like that was a really great question and answer session. Thanks for everyone being so engaged. Ronaldo, thank you. I had watched a couple of your presentations prior, and I knew this was going to be great, and it was. I knew you'd bring up a lot of great information. To answer some kind of more open-ended questions, yes, Ronaldo's presentation is going to be made available to everyone who attended today, as well as a recording of the webinar, which will be available, in the next 2 weeks. I'll let you all know when that's ready. And Ronaldo, again, I want to thank you so much for your time, for this excellent presentation. I know you put your information on your presentation, so people will be able to reach out to you directly. But if anyone's looking for any other information, you can also reach out to me, and I'm happy to route you, to Ronaldo. Lastly, please mark your calendars. Next month, we're going to have a presentation from MSIC Partners. It's going to be on Wednesday, September 29th, and that's going to be about collective action lending and details about partners' benefits and services. And with that, I wish you all a great rest of the summer for what's left for most of us, and we will hope to see you next month. And again, Ronaldo, thank you so much.
Thank you. You all have a great.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
take good care. Bye-bye.